Thank you for coming. I'm here with Engelbert, I'm Dirk, and we are here with the lamp. Maybe many of you have already seen the lamp. It's the lamp Lucia. Has anybody seen the lamp meanwhile? Okay, that's good, that's good. So we are here with the lamp. That's a combination of flickering lights. Louder? Even louder? Okay. Is it better this way? You understand me? Great. So we are here with a lamp. It's a lamp to achieve altered states of consciousness. It's a different way to achieve these states and to keep them for a while. And it's a lamp with flickering, stroboscopic light combined with a constant light, white light, with some differences in presenting the frequencies. And we made it to achieve an experience comparable to a near-death experience. Engelbert could talk afterwards more about it. And, well, after a while, when we used it, it was a lamp to achieve these states, and we used them in our practices. So I'm a neurologist, clinical neurologist. Engelbert is a psychotherapist. And we used it with our patients, and we saw, hey, it has a very strong effect and a very beneficial effect also on health issues. And we asked, what's going on? It's not a healing device in the original sense, in the strongest sense. It's just a device to go into altered states. And yeah, it was to find a word for it, and we coined this word neuropsycholysis. We wanted to express different aspects of what we do with the light stimulation of the brain or the consciousness. And I think the most important part is the lysis. We are going to get into a state of a deconstruction of our constructs that we have in mind, of our psychic constructs to understand the world, and as well to open up the modes in which our brains work, trained to think a different way, a certain way, and we want to open it up to take up new aspects of the world, going out of the matrix of our overtrained thoughts and interpretations. And we not only do it in the sense of psycholysis. You might have heard of the psycholytic therapies that combine minimal doses of psychedelics and combine them also with psychotherapy. But we added it with a neuro because meanwhile we see more results about what's going on in the brain when we offer the light, and also it's a more neurological, physical way to approach the same what's going on under psychedelics, and what's so important for us to get acquainted to our world, to be open to get a new point of view, to see things in a different way that we have looked at them before. And for this short example, hope it works. Yep. Oh yeah, it works. So it's a piece comparable to Gestalt psychology. It's a principle how we perceive the world. The dots are moving all the time the same way, and now they seem to be chaotic. But if we link them, and our brain is doing it for us also, we link them, we can see patterns emerging. These are the gestalts that build up when we look at chaos. Our brain is doing it for us. Even it has a rhythm inside in the brain where we can measure that round about every 3 seconds our visual view on the world is changing. You might have seen this Freudian picture with a lady, and you can look at it for a while, and after a while the picture switches to Freud, the other time to the lady. So it's something that we are doing. And this compares to, oh, now I have to go this here. That's easy. No, that's another talk. Sorry. Yeah, and it's not only about the brain, it's also about the nervous system. The nervous system is much bigger than our central nervous system, the brain, spinal cord, the peripheral nerves. So it's linked together. But we look at it at the moment from the viewpoint of the brain, and we stimulate the brain with light. And maybe it looks a little complicated, but at least when the light comes to the eyes, it's processed by the nervous system starting at the back part of the eyes and goes to the occipital lobe, where some function of our visual perception, basic visual perception, happen. And then it's distributed, this information, to other parts of the brain, where also we can perceive movements, colors, structures, complex structures. And there's another pathway down the spinal cord, the brainstem, down the spinal cord, and this brings together the different parts of the nervous system, also the sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomous parts, not only the conscious parts. And there's also a link to the pineal gland. I think you know enough about it, about the psychedelics in the pineal gland and the ongoing discussion about it. So that's the way, and we are working with frequencies, with vibration, and we try to make good vibrations, good vibes, to have a good feeling and to go into the experience, be open for the experience, what comes up in front of our eyes when we close the eyes and look at the light. So in the beginning, we did also an EEG recording to see what's going on. No, hey, yeah, it works. So that's an EEG sample that we did in the beginning of our work to see what's in the objective world, the hardcore material world. So on the upper line, you see the EEG, all the waves, the frequencies that go over a certain point of the brain. And that's a recording during a session with the light. When we did the light session, you can see here the lower frequencies in the time axis coming up, and here the higher frequencies. It's about the alpha frequency. And the people who went under the light, they showed up a phenomenon that you can see in the beginning here. Frequencies came up, not only the frequencies that were in our spectrum of the light, presenting the light, but more frequencies came up. And they are known in the literature as harmonics in the brain, known to be linked to meditative states. So at that point, at least, we had connection to objective measurement, and also the link to the experience. The people told us that they were going into a deep harmonic resting state, looking at this stroboscopic light. And that's about the frequencies of the light, not only putting influence on our brain, because our brain also has frequencies. So it comes to an interference of frequencies, connecting to our thoughts. And we can operate in a very active manner with the light that comes to us in the stroboscopic light and the constant light. And these effects were very strong, so it was clear there is something going on. And this point, so, yeah. So this were the first movements with registration that we could do. Meanwhile, there's a group at the University of Sussex around Schwarzman, and they made better EEGs. They have more capacities at the university with more caps where they take the electric currency of the brain. And they could find out that all these dots that take up the electric activity are connected. And that comes to the modes our brain is working. Default mode network, the network that keeps our self-confidence, self-understanding, upright. During the sessions, the connections changed. So there was a change between our preformed default mode network and other networks. There are other networks, and the networks that built up during the session. And that's very interesting because this is linked to getting rid of structures and get free of the structures, building up new structures that we can also use in our daily practice. And we do it similar to the microdosing. And the most important slide I can't show because it's the in-between. What happens in the brain when it switches from one state to the other? It's a moment. And that seems to be the moment where the aha effect occurs, where a new idea may come back to us in our preformed matrix of our thoughts. So we have a portal to go out of this matrix. And that's an effect that's very similar to the psychedelic effects. That's also from the study in Sussex, where they compared the effect of psilocybin and the flickering stimulation on different dimensions of psychic experiences. And by having a look at it, you can see that the star is overlapping very strong. So the overall experience is really comparable to the psychedelics, the effect, and also what the people tell us is very similar. And yeah, by this we are doing kind of mini dosing, microdosing with the light, and also use it this way, even for people who would never take psychedelics. And afterwards they understand why it makes sense to take psychedelics. Yeah. So now the next moment, I give you this one.
Okay, my work started in a different field because originally I was interested in exploring the near-death experience when I was studying psychology in Innsbruck. And I really soon got in touch with the work of Kenneth Ring, who was interested in the after effects of the near-death experience, which he found out is quite the same for most people having intense near-death experience where there is a bright white light involved. So he found out that the personality of those people changes in a 5 years' time and stayed stable then for the rest of their lives. Because he made a lot of investigations, long-time investigations also. And for me as a psychotherapist, at that time I did my psychotherapy training, it was extremely interesting to hear that there is an experience which lasts just for 4 or 5 minutes maximum and has an effect which is much better than the usual outcome of psychotherapy. So if someone has, after a 5 years psychotherapy, intense psychotherapy, the same outcome as after an intense near-death experience, he can be lucky. So I was reminded to what Milton Erickson once said. He said, a psychotherapist who knows what's the problem of his client, or even worse, who knows how to solve it, should send that client to another therapist who does not know that, because a therapist is not allowed to know that, because otherwise he would manipulate his client. And the other guy I learned to know personally was Viktor Frankl, where I did also my training. And he said, health is a state of consciousness which is so deep within us that if sickness or disease appears, it's just like clouds in front of the sun. Does not mean that the sun has gone away, it's just that the clouds are in between. And he also saw his existential analysis, which I did at my original training, as a way to help people get in touch with their inner health so that they can take it with them and cope with diseases by living aside by the disease. I don't know how this word is in English. But so I started trying to use hypnosis to induce a near-death-like experience. And this worked quite well for some people, but not for all people, because some people, when they were in a trance state, sitting in front of me and with closed eyes, and I said things like, and now imagine a bright light coming closer and closer. They tried so hard that they put themselves out of the trance state. So it was a logical step for me to use a hand lamp. And when I told my clients, now imagine a bright light coming closer and closer, I turned on the hand lamp, which was a very bright one, and coming closer and closer to the eyes, nearly so close. And that was the point when really amazing things happened, because people after such kind of therapy sessions, they reported very individual experiences, which sounded a lot like what I heard when I did interviews with people after near-death experience. Dirk had the idea to combine the constant light with a flickering light to stimulate a kind of tunnel experience, because our primary intention was to simulate a near-death experience, to stimulate the effect of a near-death experience. As our brain does not make a big difference between something we're seeing and something we're imagining to do. So we had our coffee machine in our office rebuilt by a technician who put a constant light in between and flickering lights around. And when we were sitting in front of our coffee machine for the first time to see what we created, we could not believe what we saw, because suddenly there were colors and things like that. And we never had our intention was not to do something like that, but to simulate a near-death experience. So we had to find out what it was, what we'd done. And so the lamp took us on a way which at least leads us here every second year. On the first year of the Breaking Convention, 2011, I think, we presented the lamp, and we were not so sure about what we are really doing. In the meantime, we found out that it is very easy to combine the lamp with conventional psychotherapy, for instance, behavioral therapy to desensibilize anxiety disorders, for instance, or with analytical psychotherapy to enhance the free association, for instance. But we found out that there is another kind of another way of working with the lamp, which is much more satisfying for us and which is much more in tune with what Proekl and Milton Erickson said. And we came to, as always, we came to that by coincidence when we drove with our car from Kufstein to Stockholm to participate in a big conference called Towards the Science of Consciousness. We were discussing that the more people allow themselves to get rid of their intentions or expectations and try to see the lamp as a kind of art they are creating by themselves, an art experience which is just meant to be beautiful and enjoyable, then the effect is much more intense and totally individual. So we were thinking about, might be a good idea in one of the coming conferences, showing our device not in the therapeutical area, but on the artist area. And interestingly, when we arrived in Stockholm at the conference, the lady, which is the director of that conference, came to us and said she had made a decision and she hopes that it's right for us. She put us to the artists. And when we been at that floor where the artists was, after a while I recognized there was a small lady hearing of what the people are saying when they came out of our tent where we presented the lamp, and listening all the time. Suddenly I went to her and asked her if she wants to try out the lamp by herself, and she said she is not able to do that because she has a disease or a problem with her eyes. And she introduced herself as Julia Ustinova, who just finished academic work about the ancient Greek mystery cult experience. And she translated those original texts by Parmenides, for instance. And she said all what the guys of ancient Greek said about the mystery cult experience, exactly the same as the people coming out of that tent. And so when we got, we thought it is a good idea to go a little bit into that, and we found out that it's nearly the same what they are doing. They had caves where they had sensory deprivation, and after a while, they put the people into a part of the cave where there was a fire, and in front of the fire there was a wheel they could turn, so there was also a flicker effect. Also in the medieval ages, people who could afford that, they went with carriages when the sun was setting behind the alley and had a flicker effect for that. And so we started to do therapy in a way which is not usual in Austria, where we are coming from, because in Austria there is a law for psychotherapists who are just allowed to make psychotherapy when they first make a diagnosis, where they define what's the problem of this client, and then making a therapy plan in how many sessions, with what method have I to do to solve the problem of this client. So I would say if Milton Erickson knows what therapy is, it's forbidden now in Austria. So we're doing it nevertheless because we're doing exactly the same. We have not the slightest idea what someone experiences when he's sitting in front of the lamp, and I think we are not allowed to know that either, because otherwise we would manipulate. We can just help people to go into the experience as deep as they can, and then helping them to discuss what they experience, but not in a way that we tell them something they do not know, but they're telling us something we did not know before. That's the way therapy has to be done, and that's what neuropsycholysis meant to do. Helping people to use a doorway into themselves and see what they can find out there. And we usually use the lamp, as the lamp is very easy to handle for that. We can speak to the client, we can change the frequencies in a way the client tells us to, so he's able to shape his own psychedelic experience. That's a big advantage. And on the other side, we use also different kind of technologies. For me, for myself, in the last 2 years, I had a lot of experiences with different kind of breathing techniques, which is also interesting because this is one of the effects the lamp had on me. When I was studying psychology in the 80s in Innsbruck, I did some breathing workshops and it never worked with me. The only thing I get out of it was a cramp in my hand and lying on the ground and nothing happened, except I felt a little strange. But when I had the lamp I was very curious in DMT. The lamp made me curious for DMT. I tried out DMT and I recognized how the DMT, which makes a very comparable experience, I would say, changed my breathing pattern. When I did the same breathing as with the DMT in combination with the lamp or with the sun, I could go into an experience as deep as the DMT experience or as a meditation experience. So we helping also our clients finding a technology which is most suitable for them to go into such kind of experiences, because it's, I think, very important that not every technique is very useful for every person. And there are many people like me who are a little bit afraid of the psychedelics, so I don't try to take them too often. And but every time I take them and try them, it's just like I learn something new, and I can try them for months and months, and that's the way therapy should be. Okay, I hear that it's 1 minute, and I think the most important thing is said. So if there are some questions, or if you have something to say, at least.
It's a technological tool that we have, but it's also about going out to the sun, looking to the sun and enjoy this power of the sun. And it's like communicating with the light. And so I would say, go out to the sun and enjoy it. It's in us all the time.
Yeah, and also an individual output of that. At the first breaking convention, I learned the work of Gregory Sams and the living sun. And I always, since that, came more and more to the same conclusions. For me, the sun is also something which is very, very alive. Okay.